Tren is the most powerful compound out there. I can see why you'd want to run it that first time, because it gives you a different kind of 3D look and instantly gives you the results you want. And today's sponsor is First Attachment Nutrition. Use code SETH10 at checkout. So, you finally decided to hand in your natty card and become a Sith Lord and join the dark side. Well, welcome to the world of steroids. I would say if you're going to be doing this, going down this road, the enhanced route, you need to have some things put into consideration and not be one of those 19-year-old TikTokers just jumping on it for the sake of it. Number one, I would prefer, as a coach and just as anybody who follows the science, that you have at least 5 years of training and you're over the age of 25, so your brain is fully developed. If you're going into this at age 20 and your testosterone is as high as it's ever going to be, it's kind of fucking pointless in my opinion. Unless you're really trying to go pro in bodybuilding, then I can understand, you want to start early. But other criteria, I have my checklist up here for you, and you guys can download this after the video if you want to follow along. I figured that's the best way to do it. I shared it on the site Craft, so you can just go in there and check things out and take it on the go. I figured it'd work a little better than a PowerPoint. Have you successfully been ignored by your gym crush for at least 6 months? I'd say that's a pretty good criteria to maybe think about starting to go on. I mean, if you haven't even introduced yourself to her yet, because you don't have the balls to, maybe you do need to fill them up with testosterone. Number two, you understand diet and training and have this dialed in at least 80% of the time. Minimum 80%. I cannot tell you how many guys tell me they are eating 4,000 calories a day, or they're eating clean, and then they send me their diet and they're eating Cheetos and their weights are completely off. Like, they'll be telling me they're eating 100 grams of rice and they're measuring it in ounces with a measuring cup and measure it in grams. Like, you need to measure it in grams and you need to know what calories are actually in what you're eating. I need to do it consistently. I have tons of guys that just do the craziest things, and I'm like, this is why you have no results. Natty, let alone enhanced. Get your diet down natty first. You can make a ton of gains with that before you hop on anything. Next bullet point. You have done your research on what compounds you want to try. But your first cycle should generally just be testosterone. I know, you saw the trend stinger at the beginning. We will get into it in a minute. Do not run SARMs. SARMs turn the frogs gay. If you're going to go down this road, you might as well do the real thing. Instead of crashing all your hormones for these weird freaking Harry Potter drugs, as my favorite TikToker will say. We'll just call him Voldemort. I'm not going to say his real name because I'm not going to give him any fame for it. But he gives some of the worst advice out on the internet. And if you follow Voldemort, please do not follow his diet. I know he's posted that he drinks White Claws and eats freaking gummy bears and McDonald's and milkshakes every day and still just blast Tren out the ass to compensate for all of it. Please do not take that approach. You're not going to stay big. You're going to deflate like he does every time too. All right, and so assuming you have smart design, your training, and your nutrition is down, big things. Big things. Make sure you have your PCT or your cruise planned ahead of time with the doctor's guidance. I'm not going to tell you to do this on your own, but if you choose to do it, make sure you have the things you need to come off of it first. If something goes wrong and hits the fan and you need to come off, you need something to get your balls restarted again. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable for at least a month. A lot of times when you crash your hormones like that, you can get acne, more hair shedding, your estrogen can go down, you just feel like a bitch. Your testosterone crashes as everything restarts and you feel like even more of a bitch. You lose motivation, you eat a bunch of food, and you don't go to the gym, you get fat, and you're worse than you were before you even started. So make your plan, to either have your PCT in line, or if you're going to go on again in the future, you're probably better off cruising versus crashing all your shit and then trying to get back up again. And with proper scaling, make sure, I mean, you can start 500 right away if you want. That's the old bro science, freaking forum logic. No logic. It was just a round number they chose one day, and that's what everybody rolled with. But there's no reason why you can't start like 300 and work your way up. 300 milligrams of test is like 5 times what your balls produce. And if you start there, you can make some gains and then scale up once you plateau each time as you bump your calories up. There's no need to start at 500. You go from 0 to 100, or 500 technically. You know what I mean, the saying. And all of a sudden you're breaking out in acne, you're shedding hair, you're having all kinds of other issues because you went so high on it, your body's not used to it, you're over aromatizing. It's so much easier just to stay at 300, assess the response there. If you're fine and want to go up, go ahead, be my guest. But some people aromatize really heavily and they don't know until they start going. And if you're already at 500, it's a lot harder to fix all the issues going on than it is if you were at 300. So under proper scaling, I also put, you should probably run at 16 weeks. I know the old logic was 12 weeks because that's 3 months and it was a quarter of a year. Once again, the old bro science forums liked round numbers, and a lot of contest preps back then were 12 weeks at a time in like the 80s and 90s. Since then, people have learned, hey, if we bump this out to 14 or 16 weeks, even in a contest prep scenario, we can make more subtle changes and you don't die the whole time and you end up looking better in the end. Same thing your first time going on test. I would make sure you start out 16 weeks because it takes 6 to 8 for everything to kick in anyway, especially if you're running long esters. I wouldn't run prop your first time, like it's just not worth the potential side effects. But if you're running a SIP or an anti-ester, go ahead, take it 16 weeks. Because it's going to take you a little while to even feel it. So a lot of times you'd run the 12-week cycle, you don't feel it till week 8, and you get 4 weeks on essentially, and then you're crashing your shit and going back off, which really wouldn't make much sense. You're not making many gains out of it in that short amount of time. And next section, training and diet should be progressive. This is where most people struggle. I do see this quite a bit. And if it's something you struggle with, let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to answer any of them as soon as I can, or maybe even make a video if I have some good topics in there. But it's what I commonly see because people struggle with when their weight starts to go up. They like to stay with what's been working well, but you really need to progress your calories up if you're gaining muscle, or down if you're cutting. And it's kind of hard to dial that in sometimes. That's why it's good to have a coach to really objectively look at you and give you feedback on where you're going, because we're our own worst critics. Anytime we're looking good, we're kind of like, I kind of look like shit. And then, you look back at the pictures like 2 months later, you're like, I look pretty good back then. But it's always in your head that body dysmorphia with bodybuilding is terrible. And anyone can take the gear and feel great, but looking great takes the work of all 3 things. And that's what I was getting at before. I know tons of guys in my gyms, and I know a lot of you guys do too. You'll start talking to them. They tell you they're on like 6 different compounds. Their eyes are turning yellow from freaking hammering too much anadrol and all that, and they don't even look like they freaking lift. And I'm like, dude, it's crazy. It's crazy, but it happens a lot. I'd say probably 66% of guys, maybe 70% at the gym that are on gear don't look like they're on it. So it really does take the diet and the training to be dialed in to make the results. You want to make the most of it. You only have so many blasts in the tank before something's going to go wrong. Eventually you're going to have some health issues, or your hair's going to start falling out. And it might be 10 or 15 years down the line, but at some point something's going to give. So you better make the most of every single time that you take hormones. And you don't want to be the small guy admitting he's on gear to the gym bros, as I said. But another point I was getting at, even C-Bum and Nick Walker, they have coaches, and Nick Walker makes it a priority to be in bed by 10 p.m. every night. I mean, he's a freaking massive mutant monster. and he's very structured. Make sure he gets his rest in above everything else. It's not the gear. The diet is a big part, but Nick prioritizes his training and his sleep more than anything. And that's how it should be. And another point I wanted to make, the testosterone increase should make you more driven. I do feel that myself, and I've heard that from lots of other people. It makes you want to get up, go to the gym. You feel like you got the ball rolling more often. You don't have those days where you're kind of like dragging ass, barely getting in there. But there's one thing to look out for. It also drives you to be a meat butcher. So don't be spanking your monkey before the gym, because right around week 8, it happens with everybody. You feel like a freaking middle schooler again, and you cannot stop touching your thing. So don't be playing with Little Wet Willie before the gym, because it decreases your performance. Do it afterwards or in the morning. But Seth, what about my D-ball kickstart? Don't D-ball. Like, even as an advanced guy, none of the pros use it. It's just an antiquated drug that just drives your E2 up. I mean, I've heard of some guys running a very, very, very small dose of it just for like the little happy, I can't think of the word of it. There's a little bit of like almost like a high you get from it. So I'll use it for the euphoria, but it's just one of those ancient weird things that got passed around on the bro forums forever. And yeah, you feel bigger when you're on it, but it's because of all the water retention and the high estrogen you get from it, and then it goes away within a couple weeks anyway, and it makes it harder to get the calories down. So there's just no point in running D-bol. If you're gonna run an oral, do Anavar. As I said, your first cycle, I'd still stick to test, but if you really wanted something, you could run Anavar the last few weeks at like 25 milligrams. Anavar will give you really good pumps. It gives you a bit of a strength boost, but it will completely nuke your HDLs. Like, it happens with everybody. I've yet to see anybody not get their HDLs crunched pretty hard by it. Even at 25 milligrams, you might find yourself down to like 20, 25 or so. I mean, on your first cycle, you really shouldn't be much below 30, 35 HDL. Testosterone doesn't really crush it a whole lot as much as some of the other compounds do. Anavar is known for crushing it. It's pretty safe besides that, though. It doesn't really show up on anything else, but it does nuke HDLs. And all the influencers love Tren. Tren's become famous over the last few years. I don't know why besides TikTok, honestly. But yes, it makes you look great. Yes, it is, no doubt, the most powerful agent we have in terms of just a complete recomp. I don't think it puts on the most muscle, but it definitely gives you a certain look, a leafy look, that nothing else gives you as quickly as it does. But the problem with it is it has the worst side effects. It was developed for cattle. It is currently still used with cattle, but in Finiplex tablets, which are little pellets they inject under their skin, like near their butt, and it just slow releases the Trenbolone in their bloodstream. We don't do that as humans, but guys in the 90s used to break the little tablets, the little pellets, up to get the Finiplex out, and that was the Tren, and they would just get enough to make enough to inject after doing the whole science thing with it. I'm not a homebrew guy, so I can't really tell you the whole process. Yeah, so the problem with Tren is obviously night sweats. That'll decrease your performance. You're going to have a ton of possible side effects, and since you're not even experienced with testosterone, you don't know if it's coming from the Tren or not. Not only that, but it can give you sometimes hyperlactin or a feeling of having high estrogen when you don't. Then you start railing AIs, then you crush your estrogen, then you feel like crap, you have a limp noodle dick. Then you go ahead and, yeah, there's just so many things that can go wrong. It's just not worth doing your first or second cycle, and really you shouldn't touch it unless you're going to like a contest prep or you have a photo shoot, something big, and even then I wouldn't run it over 150 or 200. Some guys will push it to 300. 300 is okay, but that's where you really start to ramp up side effects. I've heard of people taking up to over a gram or gram and a half of it, and I think they're just fucking insane. Like, you got to be working a job where you are isolated by yourself while you go insane. Because everybody's going to hate you because you're just going to be this self-centered, egotistical, paranoid dick if you're on that much Tren. For my results, I put on a good 30 pounds of good and bad weight. I was just pushing calories up. I did not have a coach. I do regret that because now that I have been working with a coach, I've been able to make some huge visual gains and almost in like a recomp. Like my body weight hasn't gone up, but the visual change is huge for me personally. I did feel much better though, because as I said, my natural test was below female trans athlete levels. I don't want to say anything that would get me in trouble, all the YouTube gods. So in closing, make sure you do your research. Do your research. Talk with your doctor. If you need TRT, talk to a qualified doctor who can take you down that path and they can check your blood work and all that. Don't trust Johnny Sins or the guy off TikTok you see to give you good advice. And if you're gonna do it, stick to testosterone only. There's no reason to use another compound your first cycle. If you do decide to cruise, we can go over what to do in subsequent cycles in the next video. So just drop a comment below, let me know what else you want to hear about, and we can get going from there.